Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining what may be a third time. We're here today with T Ghosted, Money Moves by T. My name is Sherry Carth, and I'm the program director at One Source Corporate Builders, where we build minds geared toward business success. We are here today to talk about money. That's what T does. She has a gift concerning money. And on last week, she was with us and she told us the importance of having a budget. We talked about a simple budget. As simple as just having your income, listing your income on one side, listing your expenses on the other side. And the benefit of having a budget is that two things: we can see where our money is going, and then we can tell our money where to go by making adjustments. And today we're going to continue in that same realm, that same area. Today we're talking about how can I save when? And you fill in the blank. When I don't have enough, how can I save when I've already got too many bills? How can I save when I keep going back and getting it? You fill in the blank. So she's going to teach us today how to save. Hi, T.
Right.
We can hear. Okay, we had to switch platforms, but it's okay. Glad you're with us. How's grandson?
Quiet.
Okay, so we're gonna do this while he's quiet, right? She has an
Yeah.
adorable grandson, so we had to kind of wait for him to get positioned, right? And so we are back. So
Yeah.
T's gonna talk to us about saving, saving, saving. What do you want to talk to us about, T?
Well, I think that first savings is it should be something that's a high priority in our life,
Mm,
which I think we put that on the back burner, and we
mhm,
feel like once we pay all of our bills, we're unable to save. But I think that we that's the wrong way to do it. Our savings
mhm,
should be our priority. Our
mhm,
savings is our way, um, is considered our way of paying ourselves. We work every day to pay bills.
mhm,
So we have to make ourselves a priority and to work for ourselves as well. Even though when we pay our bills, that's for us, but we also have to have other means and we have to get prepared for some things in life that's going to happen.
mhm. So you talked to me about emergencies, and nothing is worse than when a situation comes up and we don't have the finances to take care of it. Talk to
Yeah.
us about that.
Well, first, I would like to um, first point out that we all define emergencies differently.
Okay.
And I think it's important to first define what an emergency is.
Mhm.
And for me personally, an emergency is not something that happens on a regular basis. Um, for example, getting my hair done is not an emergency ever
Okay.
because it's something I do on a regular basis. That's
Okay.
nothing out of the norm.
Mhm.
Um, car repairs, that should not be considered emergency. That's something that you should budget for. An
Okay.
emergency would be COVID.
Okay.
That's an emergency. That's
Okay.
something that you could not have been prepared for, or something that was unforeseen.
Mhm.
So my thought is that when you have to be careful what you call an emergency because we can find ways to fool ourselves into thinking that okay, this is good, this is valid, this is an
Mhm.
emergency.
Mhm.
um, and I find that when you are more prepared you have less emergencies. So
Mm.
I think the first thing is to first identify what you call an emergency
Mhm.
and try to have a lot less of them.
Okay. All right. So we want to identify what we call emergencies and have less of them. When you say have less of them, how is that? If it's something that's unforeseen, how can we have less emergencies?
Well, that's being prepared.
Being
Being prepared help you have less emergencies.
okay.
because what one person might consider an emergency, say for instance, if you haven't been saving
Mhm.
and you have to get, I'm going to say your car doesn't start, so you have to get a starter.
Mhm.
And that is, I don't know, it's different for each car, each make and model. But if it costs you $300, if you have no savings, at this point, that's an emergency because that's your means of transportation, and
Mhm.
everybody needs their transportation to get to and from, whether it's work, whether it's daycare, whether it's the gym, wherever it is that you have to get to and from. Your vehicle is one of the ways, one of the main ways that you get to and from places. So that could be considered an emergency for some people. Now, it's an emergency if you don't have the money.
Mhm.
If you have $3,000 in your savings, that $300 is no longer considered an emergency because it's not an issue. It's not
Okay.
a problem. You just go and get the $300 and pay for your repairs.
Okay. So having a savings minimizes the effects and the levels and of what would be an emergency.
Right, and the intensity of it,
Mhm.
it it changes things as far as how you're able to cope, how you're able to get
Mhm.
through it,
Mhm.
because for all of us we have unforeseen things, we have emergencies, we have, and it's all about how you're going to get through it. For most people, when they have an emergency, and I speak for myself in the past, when something would come up and everything was an emergency because I
Mhm.
had no savings, I had to go and try and borrow money, or I had to go and try and figure out a way to get the money. But once I was able to have some savings,
Mhm.
then that really cut down on the stress
Mhm. Mhm.
of everyday life.
Right.
So I feel like savings is more of a peace of mind.
Okay.
It give you peace
Mhm.
where there could be a lot of chaos.
Mhm.
So I feel like it should definitely be a priority, and it should be definitely put up there with your tithing. It should
Mhm.
be before you do anything else. If you run
Mhm.
short on something, it'll have to be on a bill because
Mhm.
you shouldn't run short on yourself.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, so we talked about how having a savings minimizes the effects of emergencies. So let's go back to saving. So now that we have established that, now that we understand that if we have a cushion, when those situations comes up, I can just go get them, go into my cushion and get some and fix the problem, right?
Right.
Fix the situation.
Right.
So now that that's clear, how can I save? How can I save?
Well,
Um, talk about some ways to save. You said I should save 10%, at least 10% of my income. So we're going to say this first. Now, we have to put God first. So we're going to pay our tithes first. Then we're
right.
going to pay us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
So now I'm sorry.
go ahead.
And so now that I understand that I must pay God, I must pay me before I pay my bills. How can I do that when it doesn't look like I have enough money to pay my bills already? So, what are some creative ways, or what are some of the ways that I can save? How can I do that?
Okay, let me say this first. If you put yourself first,
Hmm.
then you don't end up short. So let's just establish that.
Okay.
Somebody else will end up short, a
Hmm.
bill may end up short, but we find ourselves falling short even when we don't save. So
Hmm.
that's not an excuse to not save.
Hmm.
Um, I think that for me, I know in the beginning, I had to determine there were some things that I wanted. And I felt like, okay, I'm going to start putting money aside. And I, at that point, I realized there were so many different things that I needed to save for. To
Hmm.
just put money aside wasn't enough because if I was able to save $500, and let's say I was saving that money for my emergencies, and if an emergency came up, I found it hard to take that $500 and use it for an emergency because
Mhm.
I didn't want to start all the way from zero again.
Mhm.
So I felt like I needed to save for different goals.
Mhm.
Like, for example, I at one point I started saving quarters,
Mhm.
and I saved quarters, and I said that the goal for my quarters was that I would use that for vacations.
Okay.
So I saved quarters until I saved up, I think the maximum quarters that I had saved up, I had a bank that held $800 in quarters. So I saved up quarters in that bank. And once that bank was full, then I knew that I was able to take a vacation without taking away from bill money or other money
Mm.
because I
Okay.
had designated that those quarters to be my vacation money. But at the same time, the quarters wasn't the only way that I was saving. Um, I also have um, money coming out of my check every pay period that goes into a savings account. Money that
Okay.
I don't see and I don't touch,
Mhm.
and that works for me as
Okay.
well to be able to save.
Okay.
Um, I I also save. I also put money into my retirement account.
Okay.
So in that 10%, you may have 4 or 5 goals that you're trying to save toward, so you can separate those things out. So like for example, if my if I was planning a trip, or if I wasn't planning a trip, but I filled up the bank with quarters, that
Mhm.
was at least $800 I had that if I didn't touch it, if I only used it for my vacation, then it would be there when time come from vacation. And then in the meantime, I don't have to touch my money for retirement to try to go on vacation because
Mhm.
I already have that money set aside.
Mhm.
And equally, I don't have to touch the money that's going into this other savings account because I already have money designated for that. And I think that having those different I'm going to call them pots, having those different pots designated for a goal is important.
Mhm.
Um, but there's a number of ways of saving, and it depends on you as an individual because everybody can't save the same way. Everybody don't. I know there has been so I've taken some of the challenges that I've seen on Facebook in savings. And I've done the envelope challenge where you get 100 envelopes and you fill them all up, and at the end of that, um, when you're done filling them all up, you have like over $5,000, which was huge for me. And at the point that I saved that, I didn't have anything designated for that savings. But there are so many different ways to save. I find that some people don't operate in cash as much. So doing the envelope challenge would be kind of difficult since you're stuffing the envelopes with cash and you have to have a safe place to keep it. So
Mhm.
that may be a dilemma for some people, but that worked for me.
Okay.
Um, I've also done. I'm currently still doing actually the $5 challenge, where I just save every $5 bill that I come across, and I have now since I'm trying to travel a little bit more. I have elevated my travel savings because the quarters that was good, but now I've moved on to doing the $5 that I saved, the $5 bills, to use that for travel. Because travel is important to me, and as I said before with the budget, Anything that's important to you should be included in your budget.
Hmm.
You shouldn't feel like you can't live your life because of the restraints of a budget.
Okay. And there are different levels of savings. Different level. That's really good. I thank you for all the information that you're sharing with us. What's coming to my mind, I heard different levels of saving. You talked about retirement, which is long-term savings. You talked about doing the money challenge with the envelopes. Now, you can be in any place and save. One thing you taught me about the quarter, saving the quarters. And so I started saving quarters, and before you knew it, um, I said, "Let me see how much I have in quarters," and I had enough to buy me a designer purse and a wallet. And so it started out it's just fun. So that
Mhm.
did two things. It allowed me to get those things that I desire, and I didn't have to go into money, reserve money for emergencies. I didn't have to charge it, so savings is possible. It's possible to save at any level. So,
Yeah.
and you talked about having a separate account for those of us who maybe may not be as disciplined.
Yes.
Talk
And
about separate accounts.
I'm
Hmm.
sorry, I wouldn't even say not even discipline, but because we all do things differently,
Okay.
what may work for one person may
Hmm.
not work for the other.
Okay. Good
Mhm.
point. Good point. Uh-huh. And so a separate account that works for me. In the state I live in Missouri, at the end of the year, we have to pay personal property tax on our cars and personal property and so forth. And if you don't budget for that, you can find yourself in a bind come December of that year. So, what I have learned to do after years and years of being in a bind, every payday, I just take 15, 20. I basically know how much it's going to be. So I just divide that by 12. And each payday, I put something toward that bill. So then when December comes, I'm not struggling to pay that. I'm
Mhm.
not stressed out. So small incremental savings over a long time, it pays off. It pays off. It looks like it's not much, but if we continue on in the end, it will be great. It will be great. What about direct deposit?
Well, and let me say this. You
Mhm,
just said something about small savings. And in some cases, savings shouldn't hurt.
mhm,
It shouldn't feel like you are straining and stressing. At some point, savings shouldn't hurt.
mhm,
But you have to consider all things when you're doing your savings.
mhm.
So I'm sorry, what was your question? What did you just ask me?
Oh, direct deposit as a means of savings, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well, and and for me, my direct deposit has to go to a totally different account at a
Okay.
totally different bank, and
Mhm,
I cannot have a debit card to that account. I have
mhm,
to make it a little bit harder to get access to that. Otherwise, I will find myself going to retrieve that money that I should not be retrieving. So I have to set up a few roadblocks for myself.
that's
And the
good.
thing is, you have to be honest with yourself
Mhm,
about who you are and how you operate. Because once again, what I do may not work specifically for you.
mhm.
So you have to be honest with how you operate.
Okay. That's a good point. That's so good. Setting up those roadblocks because even there was a time that I would put money in a separate account, and because it was just so easy now that the apps are on your phone, it's just so easy to click and transfer that money over. So you talked about a separate bank, not just a separate account, a separate bank, and then no debit card for that account. That's great information. Great information. Okay. What else would you like to share with us?
Well, I think that with and we spoke specifically on savings,
Mhm,
and I know that um, it gets easier.
Mhm.
Another way for me to save, another thing that came to mind is I, when I would get a raise every year at my
Mhm.
job, I would take that money and put it toward my retirement.
Okay.
Because it's money that I've been living without anyway,
That's right.
because this is new income. So I
Mhm.
would take the increase for my from my job, and put that towards my retirement.
Mhm.
So that was like a easy transition, something that I really didn't feel because I didn't have it in the beginning. So that's another thing to think about. And retirement is important no matter how old you are. The sooner you start saving for retirement, the better off you would be,
Mhm.
because there is nothing better than compounded interest. And now that's another whole subject within itself.
Okay.
But when you start saving early, you can benefit from compounded interest.
All right. Great information. Different pots.
Yes.
Talk to us about different pots.
Well, as I said before, the different pots is for different goals.
Okay.
And you may have one pot that is your quarters. You might have
Mhm.
another pot that's your $5 bills. And it's probably important to designate those pots for something. Because if
Okay.
you don't, just like I did the 100 envelope challenge, didn't have it designated for anything. So at the end of the challenge, I had over $5,000. I started using it for bills here and a little bit there, and before I knew it, it was all gone. And
Mm,
I I really can't tell you specifically where I spent $5,000, and that's a lot of money.
it is.
Um, so I think without having a designation for those pots, it could cause you to use them for a lot of different things, and you don't see the same.
Okay. Well, T, as usual, we thank you for coming, sharing your money matters, your money information with us. You've been tuned into Money Moves by T. You can reach T at moneymovesbyt@gmail.com. You can see it scrolling across the bottom of your screen. You can reach her if you have questions or you would like for her to discuss money matters. If you would like to discuss money matters with her, you can do so. T, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to share with the people today?
No, but thank you for coming.
All right. All right. This is Sherry Carthen with One Source Corporate Builders. You've been tuned into Money Moves by T. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.